The meeting room was huge. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their special chairs, waiting for the emergency session to begin. The air buzzed with worried conversations in dozens of languages, all translated by small devices everyone wore. Admiral Krixtal stood at the front. He was from the Valorian species, tall and thin with 4 eyes that could look in different directions at once. His blue skin reflected the lights from the holographic displays around him. He looked serious, maybe even scared. Near the back of the room sat Commander Jake Morrison. He represented humanity at these council meetings. Jake was 42 years old with short brown hair that was turning gray at the sides. His face showed lines from years of stress and hard work. He wore a simple blue uniform with the Earth symbol on the shoulder. His blue eyes watched everything carefully, but his face showed no emotion. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 8 years now. He negotiated trade deals, settled arguments between different species, and represented Earth's interests. It was boring work most of the time, but today felt different. Today everyone seemed afraid. The lights in the room grew dim. Admiral Krixtal pressed a button, and a massive holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed hundreds of ships, all the same dark purple color with strange organic shapes. They looked like giant insects floating in space. These were Kral ships. Everyone in the galaxy feared the Kral. They were like space locusts, destroying everything in their path and taking all the resources for themselves. They had been terrorizing the galaxy for thousands of years. Admiral Krixtal's voice was grave as he spoke. His words came through the translator devices in everyone's native language. The speech was about 3 weeks ago when the Kral destroyed the Helian mining colonies. 2 million people had died. Men, women, children, all gone in a few hours. The Admiral played a recording from the attack. Jake watched as the Kral ship swept down on peaceful colonies. The aliens living there tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Buildings exploded. Ships burned. People screamed. The recording captured it all in terrible detail. Around Jake, several alien delegates turned away or covered their eyes. Some activated privacy shields so they wouldn't have to watch, but Jake kept his eyes on the screen. He had seen worse things in his life. Much worse. When the terrible footage ended, the room fell completely silent. Nobody wanted to speak first. The reality of what they had seen was too heavy. Finally, Admiral Krixtal spoke again. His voice was quiet but clear. He explained that the Kral had never been stopped in 3,000 years of history. Every species that fought them either ran away or died. The Kral just kept getting stronger, taking more resources and building more ships. A delegate from the Thurian species raised one of her crystalline arms. Her body was made of a clear substance that reflected light in beautiful colors. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. She asked about an old story, a legend, really. There were tales of a single warrior in a single ship who once fought an entire Kral fleet and survived. She wanted to know if it was true or just propaganda. Admiral Krixtal's mouthparts clicked together, which was how his species showed they were thinking hard about something. He said he actually had footage from that battle. It had been classified, kept secret for many years. But now, with the current crisis, he thought everyone should see it. Jake felt his jaw tighten slightly. He knew what was coming. His hands stayed perfectly still on the armrests of his chair, but his heart started beating faster. Years of military training helped him control his breathing, so nobody would notice his reaction. The new footage began. At first, space looked calm and empty. Then the Kral arrived, not just a few ships, but 200 of them. They moved together like a school of fish, perfectly coordinated and terrifying to watch. Then something small appeared from behind an asteroid. It was a human fighter ship, tiny compared to the Kral vessels. The ship was painted dark gray with barely visible markings. On the side, if you looked closely, you could see the designation HSF-7. What happened next made everyone in the council chamber lean forward in their seats. The human fighter moved in ways that seemed impossible. It didn't fly in straight lines or follow normal attack patterns. Instead, it dove straight into the middle of the Kral swarm. The pilot used the Kral's numbers against them. When multiple ships tried to catch the fighter, the human pilot would suddenly accelerate so fast that the Kral ships crashed into each other. The weapons fire from the human ship was incredibly accurate, hitting weak spots in the alien armor every single time. For 18 minutes, that one fighter held off 200 Kral ships. The pilot didn't have better weapons or stronger shields. What the pilot had was pure skill and a willingness to take risks that looked suicidal. Every move was creative, using asteroids and debris as cover, always thinking 3 steps ahead. By the time backup ships arrived to help, 47 Kral vessels had been destroyed or badly damaged. The rest of the swarm actually ran away. According to the historical records, the Kral had never retreated before. Never. But they ran from that single human pilot. The footage ended. The council chamber exploded with excited talking. Aliens who had looked defeated just minutes ago now spoke with hope in their voices. They waved tentacles and arms, their translator devices working overtime to keep up with all the conversations. A Zephon commander whose species looked like floating jellyfish with tentacles spoke up loudly. He wanted to know who the pilot was. Could they hire this warrior? Would humanity lend them such a skilled fighter to help defeat the Kral? Admiral Kriegstall raised one of his long arms to calm everyone down. He explained that the pilot's identity had been classified, kept secret. All anyone knew was the call sign, the nickname the pilot used, Ghost. Jake sat perfectly still as dozens of alien species debated about Ghost. They wondered who this pilot was, where Ghost might be now, whether humanity would share this warrior with the rest of the galaxy. His face showed nothing, a mask he had perfected over many years. Only someone who knew him very well might have noticed his eyes were slightly tighter than normal, or that his breathing had become more controlled. That battle had happened 12 years ago. Jake had been 30 years old then, younger and more willing to take crazy risks. Nebula Station, where the battle took place, had been an unauthorized mission. He had launched without permission when he learned that civilian researchers were trapped there with the Kral coming. The researchers survived because of him. Jake had been court-martialed for disobeying orders, but then they quietly pardoned him when they understood what he had done. The government classified the footage, changed his call sign, and gave him a new assignment. They decided that having one pilot scare the entire Kral swarm was information too valuable and too dangerous to be public. As the council continued debating, Jake caught the eye of Ambassador Lisa Chen. She was humanity's senior diplomat, a smart woman who had been working with the aliens for decades. Lisa was one of the very few people who knew Jake's secret. Her face stayed professional, but he could see amusement in her eyes. She was enjoying the irony as much as he was. It was almost funny, Jake thought. Everyone in this room was watching footage of him, analyzing every move he made, discussing his tactics, and wondering about his identity. And he was sitting right here, less than 50 meters away, just another human representative in a room full of desperate aliens. Admiral Kriegstall's voice interrupted his thoughts. The Admiral was looking directly at him now. He asked if humanity had any information about this ghost pilot that they could share. Jake stood up slowly and carefully. His movements were precise, controlled from years of practice in different gravity environments. He spoke clearly, his voice steady and calm. He said that information about Ghost remained classified. However, he could confirm that humanity took the Kral threat very seriously. Earth would contribute its full military resources to help the Council's defense. It was the truth, just carefully worded to reveal nothing important. The council members looked disappointed but accepted his answer. Then they moved on to other topics, discussing strategy and defense plans. As the meeting continued for hours, Jake found himself staring at a frozen frame from his old battle. That had been a different time, a different version of himself. He had been younger then, more reckless, acting on pure instinct and adrenaline. Now he was older, supposedly wiser, stuck in conference rooms instead of cockpits. But as he listened to the aliens analyze his combat techniques with academic interest, something stirred inside him. A reminder that underneath the diplomatic polish and the gray hair, Ghost was not really dead. Ghost was just sleeping, waiting. Sometimes, Jake thought, warriors never truly retire. They just wait for the moment when they are needed again. Jake's quarters on the council station were comfortable. The rooms could adjust gravity and air to make any species feel at home. For humans, that meant normal Earth gravity and oxygen to breathe. Jake kept his rooms at 18 degrees Celsius, cool and crisp. He stood by the large window watching ships come and go from the massive station. Each ship looked different, designed by different species with different ideas about how ships should look. Some were smooth and rounded, others were sharp and angular, but they all had one thing in common now. Everyone was afraid of the Kral. A soft sound at his door made him turn. He called out for the person to enter without looking away from the window. Ambassador Lisa Chen walked in. She had changed from her formal diplomatic robes into a simple gray jumpsuit. Lisa was 55 years old with short black hair streaked with silver. Lines around her eyes showed she smiled often, but she looked serious now. She had been negotiating with aliens for 30 years and nothing scared her anymore. Jake poured her a cup of tea without asking. They had worked together long enough to know each other's habits. Lisa took the tea and sat down. She spoke quietly, mentioning how interesting the meeting had been. She said she thought Admiral Crixtall might have had a heart attack when some alien suggested kidnapping Jake to make him tell where Ghost was hiding. Jake smiled just a little. He said everyone assumed Ghost was still out there flying somewhere. They did not realize that Pilot had retired years ago. Lisa's question was sharp. Had Ghost really retired? She said she watched Jake's eyes during the footage. He was not just remembering the old battle. He was studying it, analyzing it like he was planning to do it again but better. Jake turned from the window to face her. 12 years was a long time, he said. He was not that pilot anymore. He was older, slower, and spent his days in meetings instead of cockpits. Lisa set down her teacup and looked at him seriously. Maybe he was not the same pilot, she agreed. But the question was whether the galaxy needed Ghost more than it needed Commander Morrison the diplomat. The Council was organizing a defensive fleet. They were gathering every skilled pilot from 47 species. And here Jake sat. Probably the most talented combat pilot in known space pretending to be a diplomat. Jake corrected her firmly. He was a diplomat. That was his assignment. That was where humanity needed him to be. Lisa leaned forward. She told him she had known him for 8 years. She had watched him negotiate complicated trade agreements and settle arguments between species that barely tolerated each other. He was good at diplomatic work. But he was not truly alive in those meetings the way he had been when watching that battle footage today. Before Jake could respond, his communication panel made an urgent beeping sound. He pressed a button and Admiral Crixtall appeared on the screen. All 4 of the Admiral's eyes showed obvious worry and fear. The Admiral spoke quickly. The Krall had attacked the refuge colonies. 3 star systems hit at the same time. This was not a raid. This was a coordinated military assault designed to kill everyone. Jake's face became hard and cold. The refuge colonies were neutral territory. People who had already lost their homes once lived there. Refugees, families with children, old people who just wanted peace. They had no defenses because everyone respected the neutral zone treaties. Jake asked what defenses the colonies had. The Admiral explained they had almost nothing. A small patrol fleet was in the area, but they were outnumbered 50 to 1. The patrol was calling for evacuation support, trying to get people off the planets before the Krall killed them all. Jake asked how long until the Council fleet could arrive to help. Admiral Crixtall made a frustrated clicking sound with his mouth parts. 18 hours at minimum, he said. By then the Krall would have finished. They were looking at another 2 million dead civilians. The transmission ended. Lisa looked at Jake and saw something changing in his expression. The careful mask of a diplomat was cracking. Underneath it, something harder and more dangerous was coming out. She spoke quietly, telling him not to do what he was thinking. But Jake was already moving. He spoke with intensity. 2 million people, he said, families and children. Were they supposed to just sit here because it was not politically convenient to reveal that Ghost still existed? Lisa argued it was not about politics. It was about the bigger picture. If the Krall learned that Ghost was just one person, not some elite squadron of hundreds of pilots, they would specifically target him. And if they killed him, the psychological impact on the galaxy would be devastating. Everyone would lose hope. Jake walked to his personal locker and entered a security code. Inside, carefully maintained despite years of not being used, was his flight suit. Black carbon weave material designed to connect directly to a ship's neural systems. He pulled it out. The material was still flexible, still ready to be used. He spoke quietly but firmly. After Nebula Station, he had made a promise to himself. If he ever saw another Krall assault on civilians, he would not hesitate. He would not calculate odds or worry about political consequences. He would act. Lisa tried again, saying his name pleadingly. But Jake continued talking. They had classified him for 12 years, he said. Turned him into a bureaucrat because one pilot scaring the Krall was politically complicated. But 2 million people were about to die, and he was the only one who might be able to do something about it. Lisa stood up, her face showing conflicted emotions. She asked where his ship was. Everyone knew HSF-7 had been decommissioned years ago, taken apart for scrap. A slight smile crossed Jake's face. They tried to decommission it, he said, but he happened to know a maintenance chief who could not bear to destroy a perfectly good fighter. The ship had been in Storage Bay 14, Section 9, listed as spare parts for the past 12 years. Lisa understood then. He had planned this. No, Jake corrected her. He had prepared for it. There was a difference. He had hoped he would never need to fly again, but he made sure he could if he had to. Lisa walked to the viewport, staring out at the assembled ships. When she spoke, her voice sounded tired and resigned. She told him he understood that if he did this, his diplomatic career was over. The Council would know Ghost's identity. Humanity's government would have to acknowledge him publicly. Everything would change. Jake replied that everything was already changing. The Krall were escalating their attacks. The old strategies were not working anymore. Maybe it was time the galaxy stopped looking for Ghost and accepted that he had been here all along. He headed for the door, flight suit under his arm. Lisa called after him one more time. She told him she had the footage from today's meeting analyzed by tactical computers. Did he know what they found? Jake paused and waited. Lisa explained that the pilot in that old footage had made 17 decisions during the battle that should have been fatal. Maneuvers that had a 98% probability of destroying the ship. But Ghost knew something the computers did not. He knew how to turn impossible odds into tactical advantages. Her expression softened. She told him to be careful out there. The galaxy did not need a legend. It needed him to come back alive. Jake nodded once, then left. As the door closed behind him, Lisa activated her secure communication line to Earth. This breach of protocol would need to be reported. But she would make sure the report did not arrive until after Jake had launched. Some promises were more important than career advancement. In Storage Bay 14, Section 9, a maintenance robot registered unusual activity. Authorization codes that had been dormant for years suddenly activated. Lights flickered to life in a forgotten corner of the station, shining on a fighter that had not flown in over a decade. HSF-7 waited in silence as its systems began powering up after years of sleep. On its hull, barely visible under layers of storage dust, the old call sign remained painted. Ghost. The legend was about to become reality once more, and the galaxy would never be the same. The neural interface connected to Jake's spine with a familiar cold feeling. It spread across his nervous system like ice water running through his veins. He closed his eyes as the fighter's computer systems synchronized with his brain. It was a sensation he had not experienced in 12 years, but he remembered it as clearly as his own name. HSF-7's cockpit was smaller than modern fighters. It had been designed in an era when Earth was just beginning to understand Neuralink technology, but Jake had always preferred it this way. The ship was not just a vehicle he piloted. It was an extension of his body. His thoughts translated instantly into motion. The computer finished checking all systems. Everything worked. All weapons were functional. Shields were at maximum capacity. The fighter was ready, and so was Jake. He activated the communication system and set it to the emergency council frequency. His voice was calm as he spoke. This was HSF-7 requesting immediate launch clearance. There was a pause. Then a confused Valorian controller responded. HSF-7 was not in the active registry of ships. The controller asked him to identify himself properly using a current ship designation. Jake gave his authentication code and explained who he was. Commander Jake Morrison. He was launching to assist with the refuge colony crisis. Clearance was not requested, he said firmly. It was happening. He suggested they open the bay doors unless they wanted him to make his own exit by blowing through them. Another pause, this one longer. Then Admiral Crixtall's voice cut through the channel. He told Jake he was not authorized for combat operations. His assignment was diplomatic work. Stand down immediately, the Admiral ordered. Jake spoke respectfully but firmly. With all due respect to the Admiral, 2 million people did not have time for authorization debates. He was launching in 30 seconds with or without permission. The Admiral protested. Jake did not even have a combat clearance anymore. This was reckless and dangerous, but Jake interrupted him. He knew what he was, he said quietly but with absolute certainty. More importantly, he knew what the Krall were, and he knew that if he did not launch right now, they were going to watch another massacre from their safe conference rooms. Was the Admiral going to open those doors, or was Jake going to blow through them? Silence stretched across the communication channel. Then, reluctantly, the Admiral spoke. Bay doors opening. He wished Jake good luck and asked him to try not to start an interstellar incident. Jake muttered that it was too late for that as he engaged the engines. SF-7 shot from the station like a bullet. Acceleration pressed Jake back into his seat hard despite the inertial dampeners trying to compensate. The neural link fed him a constant stream of data about space around him. Nearby ships, gravitational fields, navigation routes. He processed it all with the ease of long practice. His consciousness expanded to encompass the space around him. The refuge colonies were 4 light hours away. At standard speeds, the journey would take days. But HSF-7 had never been a standard fighter. Jake activated the experimental jump drive. This was technology that Earth had quietly developed but never officially deployed or admitted to having. Space compressed, twisted, and released around the ship. When the disorientation cleared, Jake was 3 light hours closer. He had crossed the distance in just seconds. 2 more jumps pushing the drive to its limits, and he emerged in the refuge system. The scene before him was complete chaos. 3 colonies orbited different planets in the system. Each one was under assault by Krall battle groups. The small patrol fleet was fighting bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. As Jake watched, a Thurian cruiser exploded under concentrated fire. Its shields had been overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming weapons fire. Jake's tactical computer quickly calculated the situation. 147 Krall vessels, 12 Council patrol ships remaining. Colony shields were failing on all 3 worlds. Standard military doctrine would recommend immediate retreat and evacuating whatever civilians could be saved in time. Ghost never followed standard doctrine. Jake opened a communication channel to the patrol fleet. This was HSF-7, he announced. All ships should pull back to defensive positions around the colonies. Focus on keeping the colony shields operational for evacuation. He would handle the Krall himself. The patrol commander was a Zephon named Velkar. He responded with obvious confusion in his voice. HSF-7 was a single fighter. They needed to coordinate a tactical retreat, not engage in combat with impossible odds. Jake interrupted. Commander Velkar should trust him and pull the ships back. He was about to see something that would be written about in history books for centuries. Jake did not wait for a response. He accelerated toward the nearest Krall battle group. 43 vessels were arranged in their typical swarm formation. They detected him immediately, of course. To them, he was just another foolish individual thinking they could make a difference against superior numbers. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The first Krall ship fired a bolt of bioplasma that should have vaporized HSF-7 instantly. Jake's neural link processed the trajectory in microseconds. He jinked left with precision that made the shot miss by mere centimeters. Then he was among them, moving through the formation like a shark swimming through a school of fish. His weapons were older models, projectile-based rather than energy weapons. But that was actually an advantage the Krall did not understand. Their energy shields were designed to stop directed energy beams. Physical projectiles at incredibly high speeds punched through those shields with devastating effect. Jake targeted the formation's command ship first, not because it was the biggest threat, but because killing it would throw the others into momentary confusion. His rounds tore through its organic armor, rupturing the bioplasma containment vessels inside. The ship did not just explode. It detonated with enough force to damage 3 nearby vessels. The Krall swarmed toward him, trying to overwhelm him with sheer numbers. Jake dove toward a nearby asteroid field. They followed him, which was exactly what he wanted. Fatal mistake. In the chaotic environment of tumbling rocks and ice, the Krall's numerical advantage became a liability. They could not coordinate effectively. They could not bring their full firepower to bear without risking hitting their own ships. Jake, however, thrived in chaos. His neural link processed dozens of trajectories simultaneously. He found paths through the asteroids that should not have existed. He used the Krall's own aggression against them, leading pursuers into collision courses with asteroids or with each other. On board the patrol ships, crews watched in stunned silence. Their sensors tracked the impossible battle. A single human fighter was systematically dismantling a Krall battle group, not through superior firepower or advanced shields, but through skill that seemed almost supernatural. Commander Velkar's voice came through on the open channel. It was filled with awe. By the ancient stars, he said. That was Ghost. They were watching Ghost fight in real time. Jake heard the transmission but did not respond. He was beyond words now. He existed in that perfect state of combat flow where thought and action merged into one. Time seemed to slow down, giving him what felt like seconds to make decisions that actually took milliseconds. The first battle group broke after losing 19 ships. They retreated toward the second group, trying to combine forces. Jake did not give them the chance. He used the experimental jump drive again, appearing directly in the middle of the second formation before they could react to his presence. The Krall learned quickly and adapted their tactics. They stopped trying to chase him and instead created overlapping fields of fire. They were attempting to box him in with no escape route. It was actually a sound strategy, one that would have worked against any other pilot in the galaxy. But Jake had faced this exact tactic before. At Nebula Station 12 years ago, the Krall had tried the same approach. He knew their patterns now. He understood how they thought as a collective intelligence. When they created their trap, he did something completely unexpected. He stopped moving. For 3 full seconds, HSF-7 hung motionless in space while Krall fire converged on his position from all directions. Then a microsecond before multiple shots would have hit him, he engaged full thrust, but not in a direction any sane pilot would have chosen. He accelerated directly toward their densest concentration of ships. The Krall weapons fire hit each other. Ships firing through the space where Jake had been struck their own allies instead. In the resulting confusion, Jake tore through their formation with weapons blazing. 12 ships were destroyed in 30 seconds. The third battle group had been watching the destruction of their allies. They made a choice that shocked everyone monitoring the battle. They retreated. The Krall, who never withdrew, who always fought to the last ship, broke off their assault on the colonies. They jumped to hyperspace and ran away. Jake's fighter drifted to a stop. Power reserves were completely depleted. Weapons were empty. Systems were showing red warning lights from the sustained combat stress. Through the neural link, he could feel every stressed component, every overheated system. HSF-7 had given everything it had, just as he had given everything he had. The patrol fleet communication channel erupted in celebration. Species who had faced certain death moments ago now cheered. Their different languages mixed into a beautiful noise. The medical bay on the council station could take care of dozens of different alien species. It had adjustable gravity, different kinds of air to breathe, and even time dilation for species who experienced reality at different speeds. Jake sat on an examination table in the human section. He was still wearing his flight suit while a medical robot scanned him for injuries. His whole body ached in ways he had forgotten were possible. 12 years of sitting in meetings and negotiating deals had made him softer than he realized. Every muscle hurt. His spine felt like someone had tried to bend it the wrong way. His head pounded from disconnecting the neural interface. But 2 million people were alive because of that pain. That made everything worthwhile. The door opened with a hissing sound. Admiral Krikstal entered the room. His 4 eyes studied Jake with an expression that might have been respect or anger. With Valorians, it was always hard to tell what they were feeling. The Admiral spoke formally. "Commander Morrison," he said. Or should he call him Ghost now? The council was in an uproar. Representatives from 17 species wanted to meet with Jake personally. The Zephon were offering him command of their entire military. The Thurians wanted to study his neural interface technology. And the Admiral's own superiors were demanding to know why Earth had been hiding its greatest warrior for over 10 years. Jake met his gaze steadily. He had not been hidden, Jake said calmly. He was right here the whole time, attending meetings and negotiating treaties. Everyone just assumed Ghost was someone else, somewhere else. It was easier to believe in a myth than to recognize the person standing next to you every day. Krikstal's mouth parts clicked together in what might have been amusement. That was a fair point, the Admiral admitted. Although in their defense, Jake had done nothing to correct that wrong assumption. Jake asked a simple question. Would the Admiral have believed him if he had told the truth? If during one of their boring diplomatic sessions Jake had casually mentioned being the pilot who held off an entire Krall battle group alone? The Admiral was silent for a moment. Probably not, he admitted. They would have assumed it was human bragging or exaggeration. Humans had a reputation for making their accomplishments sound bigger than they really were. And now, Jake asked, what did they think now? The Admiral explained they now had footage from 3 different angles of Jake, single-handedly routing a Krall force that outnumbered him over 100 to 1. The tactical computers were still trying to understand how he made some of those maneuvers without killing himself in the process. Krixtal moved closer and lowered his voice. He needed to understand something, he said. At Nebula Station 12 years ago, Jake held off the Krall for 18 minutes. Today he fought for 47 minutes straight. Jake was older now, presumably less physically capable. Yet he performed even better than before. How was that possible? Jake thought carefully about the question before answering. Experience, he said. At Nebula Station he was operating on pure instinct and adrenaline. Today he was operating on 12 years of watching different species interact. He had learned how different cultures thought and responded under pressure. Every negotiation he conducted, every dispute he mediated, taught him something about how minds worked when stressed. He gestured toward the window where ships were still arriving with evacuees from the colonies. The Krall were not just biological machines, Jake explained. They were intelligent and adaptive, but they followed patterns. Today he did not just fight them. He understood them better than he did 12 years ago. He knew when they would adapt, when they would retreat, when they would commit to an attack. So his time as a diplomat actually made him a better warrior, the Admiral asked. Jake corrected him. It made him a better strategist. There was a difference. Raw skill got him through Nebula Station. Understanding, patience, and reading opponents got him through today. The door opened again. Lisa Chen entered with her expression carefully neutral. Behind her came a tall woman in Earth military uniform with 4 stars on her shoulders. General Kate Sullivan, Supreme Commander of Human Forces. She was 60 years old with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen more combat than most people could imagine. General Sullivan told the Admiral she needed to speak with Jake privately. It was not really a request. The Admiral nodded and left, though Jake noticed he moved slowly, clearly wanting to hear what was about to be said. The General spoke formally. Commander Morrison, she said. He realized he just violated about 47 different military protocols. He disobeyed direct orders from his commanding officer. He revealed classified information to 47 alien species. Jake simply replied that yes, he realized all of that. The General continued. He also saved 2 million lives. He demonstrated human combat capabilities that would significantly enhance Earth's diplomatic position. And he gave every species in the Council hope that the Krall could be defeated. Her stern expression softened slightly. She should court-martial him, she said. Instead, she would probably have to give him a medal. Jake blinked in surprise. He asked what she meant. Sullivan pulled up a chair and sat down. Her formal demeanor relaxed. She told Jake she was there when they classified him after Nebula Station. She had argued against it. She thought hiding his abilities was strategically stupid and morally wrong. But she was overruled by people who cared more about political complications than military effectiveness. She leaned forward and explained what happened after his mission today. Within 10 minutes of his broadcast, she received priority communications from the governments of 32 alien species. They all said the same thing. They wanted human pilots training their forces. They wanted access to neural interface technology. They wanted Earth to take a leadership role in the military coalition against the Krall. In one afternoon, Sullivan said, Jake accomplished more for human diplomatic standing than they had achieved in 50 years of careful negotiation. He proved that humanity was not just another species trying to find its place in the galaxy. He proved humans were the species that could stand against threats that terrified everyone else. Lisa spoke up then. The political landscape had shifted fundamentally, she explained. Before today, humanity was a mid-tier species. Respected but not particularly influential. As of now, humans were being offered seats on military planning councils that had been closed to them for decades. General Sullivan nodded in agreement. She told Jake what was going to happen next. His diplomatic assignment was officially over. He was being reactivated to full military status with the rank of commander. There was an option for promotion to captain. His primary assignment would be training elite pilots from all council species. She paused and her expression became more serious. His secondary assignment, if he chose to accept it, was to form and lead a special operations squadron. It would be small and elite, dedicated to hitting Kral forces where and when they least expected it. They were calling it Ghost Squadron. Jake thought about this carefully. Who would he be selecting for this squadron, he asked. The general replied that it was entirely his decision. Any pilot from any species who met his standards. The council had given him complete freedom to recruit whoever he wanted. She suspected he would have more volunteers than he could handle. Jake asked what would happen if he refused. What if he wanted to go back to being a diplomat? Sullivan smiled slightly. Then he could go back to being a diplomat, she said. No one would force him into combat duty. But she asked him to look at himself. When was the last time he felt this alive, this purposeful? Sullivan stood up. She would leave him to think about it, she said. But the offer stood. Frankly, she hoped he would take it. The galaxy needed Ghost, not the legend or the myth. They needed him, the real person. As Sullivan left, Lisa remained behind. She moved to stand beside Jake, both of them looking out at the busy station outside. She asked quietly if he was going to accept the offer. Jake admitted he did not know. Part of him wanted to. The part that remembered what it felt like to make a real difference, to save lives directly rather than through endless negotiation. But another part of him knew that once he fully committed to being Ghost, he could never go back. The legend would become reality, and that reality would become a target. Lisa pointed out that the Kral already saw him today. They knew who he was now. That target was already painted on his back whether he accepted Sullivan's offer or not. Jake was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled. He told Lisa the real irony. For 12 years he thought being forced into diplomacy was a punishment. Turned out it was training. Every negotiation, every cultural exchange, every seemingly pointless meeting made him better at understanding opponents. It made him better at predicting behavior under pressure. So diplomacy was not wasted time, Lisa asked. It was preparation, Jake replied, for this exact moment, for when the galaxy needed Ghost not just to fight but to lead, to teach, to inspire other pilots to be better than they thought possible. He turned to face her fully. He was going to accept Sullivan's offer, he said, but not because he wanted to be a legend or because he missed the excitement of combat. He was accepting because he finally understood what Ghost was always meant to be. Lisa asked what that was. Not a warrior, Jake explained. A teacher. Someone who could show others that. 3 weeks after the Battle of Refuge Colonies, Jake stood in a converted hangar bay. This was Ghost Squadron's new headquarters. Around him, 15 pilots from 9 different species worked on their fighters. Some studied tactical displays. Others practiced in simulation training. The hangar buzzed with activity and purpose. Jake had personally selected each pilot. Not because they were the absolute best in their respective militaries, though they were certainly very skilled. He chose them for something more important. They had the capacity to think differently, to see solutions where others saw only problems. Lieutenant Nina Cross was human, 32 years old. Her record included 7 unofficial commendations and 3 official reprimands for what her superiors called tactical creativity. She stood near her fighter, arguing with a Thurian engineer about modifications to her weapon systems. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes sparkled with intensity. Pilot Commander Velkar was the Zephon who had commanded the patrol fleet at Refuge. He had requested transfer to the squadron immediately after witnessing Jake's combat performance. His tentacles moved with precise control as he practiced navigation techniques in zero gravity. He was preparing for the squadron's preferred fighting environment, where normal rules did not apply. Flight Officer Crenshaw was a young Valorian, barely past her species' version of adolescence. But she had something Jake recognized immediately. She could process multiple threats simultaneously without freezing up. Her 4 eyes gave her a natural advantage in spatial awareness that even neural interfaces struggled to match. The other pilots represented species from across the council. There was a methodical Helian who approached combat like a chess game, a fearless Corvan who flew on instinct rather than calculation, a pair of bonded Silithians who moved their ships in perfect synchronization. Each one brought something unique and valuable to the team. Jake watched them work and felt something he had not expected. Pride. These were not just pilots following orders. They were becoming something new. A fighting force that combined the best traits of every species rather than being limited by any single one. His voice carried clearly across the hangar as he called out. "Squadron," he said. "Briefing in 5 minutes. Conference room." They assembled quickly, showing the discipline they had already developed under his training. The conference room was designed for multiple species with adjustable seating and atmosphere controls. Jake stood at the head of the table with a holographic display behind him. He began the briefing without wasting time. They had received their first official mission. The Krall had established a forward operating base in the Meridian Expanse. Intelligence suggested it was being used to coordinate attacks on 3 different sectors. The Council wanted it neutralized, destroyed. He activated the holographic display. It showed a detailed image of the base. The structure was massive, grown from some kind of biological material that pulsed with energy. Around it, over 300 Krall ships maintained constant patrol patterns. The defenses looked impenetrable. Nina whistled low. "That was a fortress," she said. "A standard assault would require at least 2 full battle groups with hundreds of ships. They only had 16 fighters." Jake agreed with her assessment. Which was exactly why they were not doing a standard assault, he explained. The Council had tried conventional warfare against the Krall for centuries, Jake said. It did not work. Their numbers were too great. Their coordination was too efficient, but there was a weakness they could exploit if they were smart and bold enough. He zoomed the display in on the base's central structure. The Krall operated on a hive intelligence network, he explained. Individual ships had limited autonomy. They took direction from command nodes like this base. If they could disrupt the command structure even temporarily, they could throw the entire defensive network into chaos. Velkar's tentacles waved thoughtfully as he considered the plan. But to reach the command node, they would need to penetrate the defensive perimeter. 300 ships stood between them and the target. How could 16 fighters possibly get through that? Not if they did not go through them, Jake replied with a slight smile. The Meridian Expanse was filled with unstable gravitational anomalies. Most species avoided the area because it was impossible to navigate safely. But with neural interfaces and the right training, those same anomalies could provide perfect cover and completely unpredictable approach vectors. He pulled up a navigation route on the display. It showed a twisting path through gravitational distortions that would have made most pilots sick just looking at it. They would go in fast, Jake explained, using the anomalies to mask their approach. By the time the Krall detected them, they would already be at the command node. They would hit it hard, upload a virus designed by their technical teams to disrupt coordination, and extract before the enemy could organize a response. Toran was the Helion pilot, methodical and careful in everything he did. He studied the route with concern clearly visible on his crystalline face. "Commander," he said, "this path required navigating within 300 meters of a gravitational singularity. The margin for error was essentially 0. One miscalculation and they would be crushed instantly." "Yes," Jake agreed simply, which was exactly why they were going to spend the next 72 hours practicing this route in simulation. By the time they launched for real, each pilot would be able to fly it with their eyes closed. He looked at each pilot in turn, meeting their eyes one by one. This was what Ghost Squadron was created for, he told them. Not to fight battles the conventional way like everyone else. Their job was to find solutions that seemed impossible. The Krall expected overwhelming force or desperate last stands. They did not expect precision, creativity, and a willingness to take calculated risks that bordered on complete insanity. Nina grinned widely. "So basically," she said, "Jake wanted them all to be like him." "No," Jake corrected her firmly. "He wanted them to be better than him. Each of them brought something unique to this squadron." Velkar's tactical analysis, Nina's improvisation skills, Krench's incredible spatial awareness. His job was not to turn them into copies of Ghost. His job was to help them become legends in their own right. The next 3 days were brutal and exhausting. Jake ran his pilots through the simulation repeatedly, pushing them far beyond their limits. He did not accept good enough or almost perfect. Every maneuver had to be flawless. Every timing had to be precise to the millisecond. There was no room for error when flying through gravitational singularities. Some pilots struggled more than others. The gravitational navigation was particularly challenging for species whose evolution had not prepared them for such extreme conditions. But Jake worked with each one individually. He found ways to compensate for biological limitations using technology and technique. Every pilot would be ready, or they would not go on the mission. On the night before the mission, Jake found Nina sitting alone in the hangar. She was staring at her fighter with a distant look in her eyes. He sat down beside her and asked if she was nervous. She nodded honestly. She had been in combat before, she said. But this was different. They were not just fighting. They were executing a mission that military strategists had said was completely impossible. And if they failed, it was not just their lives at stake. It was everyone the Kral would attack because that command base remained operational. Jake asked if she wanted to know a secret. He was nervous too, he admitted. Every single mission, even after all these years. The fear never went away. It never got easier. Nina looked surprised. Ghost got scared. Always, Jake confirmed. Ghost was terrified before every battle. The difference was he had learned to use that fear. It kept him sharp and focused. The moment you stopped being afraid was the moment you started making mistakes that got people killed. Back at the council station, Admiral Crickstall watched the mission recordings with something close to religious awe. Around him, military commanders from dozens of species studied every single detail. They analyzed what Ghost Squadron had just accomplished with scientific precision and obvious amazement. A Thurian general spoke quietly, her crystalline voice filled with wonder. This changed everything, she said. For centuries they had fought the Kral with massive fleets and accepted terrible casualties as the price of war. Commander Morrison had just shown them there was another way. A better way. Admiral Crickstall nodded slowly, all four eyes focused on the recording. Ghost was not just a pilot anymore, he said thoughtfully. Jake Morrison had become a teacher, a leader, a living symbol of what was possible when you refused to accept conventional limitations. And that squadron he was building would change how warfare was conducted throughout the entire galaxy. In the Ghost Squadron hangar, Jake gathered his exhausted but exhilarated pilots for a post-mission debrief. They were tired, running on adrenaline and pride. They had just accomplished something that would be studied in military academies for generations to come. Jake stood before them and spoke with sincere pride in his voice. That was a perfect execution of an impossible mission, he told them. But it was also just the beginning of their journey together. The Kral would adapt to what they did today. The enemy would try to counter their tactics, find ways to defend against their approach. Ghost Squadron's job was to stay ahead of them, to keep evolving, to remain unpredictable and innovative. Belkar's tentacles waved in enthusiastic agreement. So they would train even harder, fly even smarter, and show the Kral that Ghost Squadron was not just a single tactic or trick, he said. They were a complete philosophy of warfare, a new way of thinking about combat itself. Exactly, Jake said with a genuine smile. The legend of Ghost had always been about one pilot refusing to accept the impossible. The legend of Ghost Squadron would be about a team that turned the impossible into routine, that made achieving the unachievable look easy through skill and dedication. As the squadron dispersed to rest and prepare for future missions, Jake remained alone in the hangar. He looked at the 15 fighters arranged in neat rows. They represented so much more than just ships and weapons. They were proof of something important. Humans were not special because they were physically stronger or more technologically advanced than other species. Humans were special because they could inspire others to be better than they believed possible. The council chamber had watched battle footage for years, not realizing it was him. Now they knew the truth. Ghost had been there all along, sitting in their meetings, negotiating their treaties, hiding in plain sight. And more importantly, now, they understood that Ghost was never meant to be just one person, one ship, one isolated moment of brilliance against impossible odds. Ghost was an idea that could not be killed. An idea that spread from one determined human pilot to 15 warriors representing 9 completely different species. An idea that would continue spreading across the galaxy, inspiring new generations to look at impossible situations differently, to ask not if something could be done, but how it could be done with enough creativity and courage. The Kral had terrorized the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had destroyed countless civilizations and caused unimaginable suffering. But they had never faced humanity's greatest weapon before. Not ships or guns or advanced technology. Humanity's greatest weapon was the absolute refusal to believe that any problem was truly unsolvable. the stubborn insistence that every challenge had a solution if you were clever enough and brave enough to find it. Jake looked at the Ghost Squadron insignia painted prominently on the hangar wall. It showed a simple ghost figure surrounded by stars. Each star represented one of the member species in the squadron. It was beautiful in its simplicity and powerful in its meaning. Unity through diversity, strength through cooperation. He allowed himself to feel something he had not experienced in 12 long years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of species facing certain extinction and clinging to any possibility of survival. This was different. This was the confident hope of warriors who had learned an important truth. Legends were not born from achieving impossible victories by luck or accident. Legends were born from the willingness to attempt impossible victories in the first place. From refusing to give up even when everyone said something could not be done. The galaxy had watched battle footage for years, wondering about the mysterious ghost, creating stories and myths about a superhuman warrior who defied all logic and reason. Now they knew the real truth. Ghost had never really gone away or disappeared. He had just been waiting patiently for the right moment, waiting to remind everyone that humanity, for all its obvious flaws and countless limitations, possessed something that could never be defeated by any enemy. The audacity to dream impossible dreams, the courage to act when others cowered in fear, the stubborn refusal to accept that any fight was truly unwinnable before trying every possible option. These were the real gifts humanity brought to the galactic community. These were the qualities that made humans special and valuable, despite being physically weaker than many species. That was the real lesson of Ghost. That was what Jake Morrison had been teaching through both his diplomatic work and his combat actions. And now, through the diverse pilots of Ghost Squadron, that powerful lesson would spread across the stars like wildfire. It would reach every corner of the galaxy and inspire countless beings to be braver, bolder, and more creative in facing their challenges. Lisa Chen entered the hangar quietly, not wanting to disturb Jake's thoughts. But he sensed her presence and turned to face her with a slight smile. She walked over to stand beside him, both of them looking at the squadron insignia on the wall. "You did it," she said softly. "You took a myth and made it real. Then you took that reality and turned it into something even better. A team, a family, a movement that will change everything." Jake shook his head gently. He had not done it alone, he replied. Every person in this squadron contributed something essential. Every species brought unique strengths and perspectives. That was the real point. Humans alone could not defeat the Kraul. But humans working together with dozens of other species, learning from each other and teaching each other, that combination was unstoppable. Lisa smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. The Council was already receiving requests from other species. They wanted their own elite squadrons trained in Ghost Squadron methods. They wanted to learn how to think like Jake Morrison thought, how to find creative solutions to impossible problems. Within a year, there would be dozens of squadrons across the galaxy, all following the example Ghost Squadron had set. Jake felt a surge of satisfaction at that news. That was exactly what he wanted. Not to be the only one doing impossible things, but to teach others how to do impossible things themselves. To spread the knowledge and the mindset until it became normal rather than exceptional. The Kraul were powerful and numerous, but they were also predictable and inflexible. They followed patterns and protocols. They could not innovate or adapt quickly to new situations. That would be their downfall. The galaxy was learning to fight smarter rather than just throwing more ships at the problem. Quality over quantity, intelligence over brute force. Outside the station, a new ship was approaching. It carried volunteers from 3 species who wanted to try out for Ghost Squadron. Word had spread fast about what they had accomplished. Young pilots across the galaxy now dreamed of joining this elite unit, of learning from the legendary Ghost himself, of proving they too could achieve the impossible with enough training and determination. Jake watched the approaching ship on a monitor. He thought about all those hopeful young pilots coming to test their skills. Most would not make it through his rigorous selection process. But those who did would become part of something extraordinary. They would carry the torch forward, spreading the philosophy of Ghost Squadron to every corner of known space. The Council had watched battle footage, not realizing it was him. That sentence summed up so much irony and truth. For 12 years, Jake had hidden in plain sight, a legend pretending to be ordinary, a warrior disguised as a diplomat. But now the truth was revealed, and that revelation had changed everything for the better. The galaxy would never be the same. The Krau would never again be viewed as invincible, and humanity's place in the galactic community was forever elevated, not through conquest or intimidation, but through inspiration and education, by showing others that limitations were often just illusions waiting to be shattered by determination and creativity. Jake Morrison, commander of Ghost Squadron, former diplomat, legendary pilot, looked out at the stars through the hangar's massive viewport. Somewhere out there, the Krau were regrouping and adapting to these new threats. They would come again with new tactics and greater numbers. But now they faced something they had never encountered before in 3,000 years of conquest. They faced a united galaxy that refused to give up, a coalition of species learning to fight together with intelligence and innovation. And at the heart of that resistance was a simple idea carried forward by ordinary beings doing extraordinary things.